early July 70 AD, the noose had closed. With the completion of the circumvallation wall, Jerusalem was now fully encircled, sealed not just by wood and stone, but by terror. What had once been a city bursting with pilgrims, prophets, priests, and rebels was now a tomb waiting to be closed. Titus, the commander of the Roman legions, had brought his war machine full circle. The walls outside the city kept his enemies in. The walls inside kept hope out. Previously, during the early weeks of the siege, some of the desperate had slipped through the shadows at night, men and women braving the darkness and Roman patrols in search of food, herbs, or news from the Judean hills. But now, no one left, and those who tried were made examples. Titus, in a deliberate act of psychological warfare, ordered every captured rebel to be crucified in full view of the walls. The hills bloomed with crosses, 500 in a single day, until there was no room left to plant them. Some defectors were disemboweled by Roman soldiers who believed they had swallowed gold or jewels to escape detection. Suspicion fed brutality. Brutality fed fear. Inside the city, the scenes turned nightmarish. Dogs and rats became meat. Hay was boiled for soup. Leather belts were stripped, softened, and chewed. Mothers wept beside empty cradles. Whispers of infanticide and cannibalism crept through the starving masses like ghosts. Even Josephus, who sought to cast the Jews in a sympathetic light, could not fully veil what was happening inside the walls. The time had come for the final blow. Titus fixed his gaze on the strongest bastion in the city, the towering Antonia fortress, standing like a granite sentinel at the northwest corner of the Temple Mount. Whoever controlled the Antonia would control the temple itself. Whoever controlled the temple would command the soul of Jerusalem. Titus issued the order. All efforts now turned to the Antonia fortress. The assault began with a thunder of engines. Roman archers, artillery, and slingers opened fire on the battlements, softening the defenses. Behind the barrage, two great battering rams were rolled forward, their iron heads pounding the fortress walls with dull, rhythmic violence. Meanwhile, teams of soldiers advanced with crowbars and picks, hacking at the stonework at the base of the towers. But the fortress held. The first day of assault ended with no gains, and the legions withdrew, frustrated, exhausted, and wary of what the defenders might attempt next. Then, without warning, the earth gave way. Unbeknownst to both sides, the mines dug weeks earlier, which had brought down the Roman siege ramps, had also weakened the Antonia's foundations. A night of torrential rain, combined with the pressure of Roman machinery, caused a catastrophic collapse. At dawn, the northern wall of the Antonia fortress crumbled, a yawning breach torn open in the very face of the temple complex. The Romans rejoiced. But the defenders were ready. Behind the fallen wall, the Jews had erected a second interior barricade, a hastily constructed defense of rubble, wood, and broken stone. It was not pretty, but it would suffice. Titus, refusing to surrender his opportunity, called for volunteers. From the ranks came a group of brave, perhaps desperate men, lured by the promise of glory and spoils. Under a hail of missiles, they charged the breach and scrambled over the rubble. But they were too few. Reinforcements failed to reach them. The defenders swarmed the barricade and butchered them to the last man, in full view of the watching legions. The sight of their comrades dying without resistance sapped the will of the Roman army. A tense, bitter stalemate followed. Neither side dared move. The Antonia stood wounded, but unbroken. 2 days later, in the darkest hour before dawn, a miracle, or madness, occurred. A group of 24 Roman soldiers, led by a standard-bearer from the 5th Macedonica, and accompanied by a trumpeter, launched an unsanctioned assault. Silently, they climbed the ruins of the Antonia breach, crawled across fallen masonry, and reached the Jewish sentries. Then, silence broken by the sound of knives. The sentries were killed in their sleep, their throats slit in the darkness. The trumpeter raised his horn and sounded the signal. The blast echoed across the Temple Mount like thunder. Inside the city, panic ignited. Jewish defenders woke in terror, believing the full Roman army had breached the walls. In the confusion, they fled toward the temple, abandoning their positions, but the Romans had not yet moved. In their own camp, Titus and his officers were equally confused, but understood that something had happened. They gathered elite troops and rushed toward the sound. By then, the Jewish defenders had realized their mistake. The Romans had not entered in force. The temple was not yet lost. They turned around and surged back toward the Antonia. And so began the first great clash within the temple precinct. 10 hours of brutal, suffocating close-quarter combat erupted in the narrow corridors linking the Antonia to the temple courtyards. Men fought in pitch-black hallways, slipping in blood, grappling with enemies they could barely see. Axes, swords, and torches lit the undercroft. Smoke stung the eyes. Screams pierced the shadows. In the end, the defenders pushed the Romans back. Titus, recognizing that a direct breakthrough was impossible, ordered a temporary withdrawal. The first battle of the temple had ended. The Antonia still stood. Within a week, Titus had razed what remained of the Antonia fortress on his side of the battlefield. There would be no further retreat. On the night of July 17th, a new assault was launched. This time, 7,200 legionaries, hand-picked, 30 elite men from each century, were sent to breach the defenses. But the Jews had learned. Sentries spotted the approach and sounded the alarm. Roman and Jewish forces collided again. Chaos reigned. In the darkness, many of the defenders wore captured Roman armor, leading to confusion and fratricide. Legionaries killed their own. Rebel fighters clashed with allies. Screams of Latin and Aramaic mingled in a deadly chorus of friendly fire. As dawn broke, order was slowly restored. Both sides drew back, forming ragged lines across the northern edge of the sanctuary. A pitched battle followed, javelins arcing through the sky, stones shattering shields, arrows seeking gaps in armor. Titus tried to coordinate an organized charge, but the narrowness of the battlefield rendered Roman discipline useless. By midday, it was clear no progress would be made. Titus realized brute force alone could not win the day. The Romans would need space to fight, to break the bottleneck and deploy their formations. So, under the burning eye of the midsummer sun, he ordered the construction of 4 massive ramps, this time aimed at the northwestern corner of the Temple Mount. The defenders responded with unrelenting fury. Waves of skirmishers stormed the work crews, while archers atop the temple hurled missiles, oil, and firebrands. Yet still the Roman machines crawled forward. In desperation, the defenders destroyed their own colonnade, tearing down the structures connecting the parapets to the Antonia, denying the Romans a route of approach. At the same time, they launched a major sally against the circumvallation wall at the Mount of Olives. Though it failed, it was a reminder. Jerusalem would not die quietly. Then, on July 27th, a rare opportunity emerged. Roman scouts observed that the northwestern colonnade, weakened by the defenders' redeployment, had been left undermanned. Titus acted immediately. Ladders were raised and hundreds of legionaries scaled the walls. At last, they had seized a section of the temple defenses. But it was a trap. The defenders had filled the rafters and rooftops with bitumen and dry wood. As the Romans advanced, the fuel was ignited, and the entire structure exploded into an inferno. Roman troops burned alive, screaming as they fell from collapsing walkways. The flames could be seen from across the battlefield, a fiery testament to Jewish defiance. Again, Titus turned to rams and picks, battering the walls by day, tunneling by night. But the Temple Mount, massive, Herodian, and reinforced, defied destruction. Even the most advanced Roman engineering was blunted by its thickness. In frustration, Titus ordered another direct escalade. Centurions, desperate to rouse their men, began hurling legionary eagles onto the walls, daring their soldiers to recover them. What followed was a massacre. Roman troops scaling the ladders were cut down or cast off the battlements. Those who made it to the top were isolated, surrounded, and slain. The assault was once again abandoned. But the son of Vespasian would not relent. In early August, Titus ordered a final push. The objective was now clear: break the Antonia bottleneck and spill onto the broad temple courtyard, where Roman numbers and formation tactics could finally be used to their full potential. To do this, he masked archers and artillery around the ruins of the Antonia, blasting the defenders with ceaseless volleys. Once the wall was cleared, the Romans tore down the entire northern colonnade, opening sight lines and giving their missile troops full fields of fire. The Jewish defenders were forced to pull back across the courtyard, forming a new defensive line bisecting the Temple Mount, with the Holy of Holies at its heart. And then it happened. On August 5th, in the very heart of the siege, the temple sacrifices ceased. Since the beginning of the war, through famine, fire, and slaughter, the priests had continued the daily rite of Talmud, the sacred sacrifice of lambs to Yahweh. But now, with no animals left, the altar was silent. The connection to God was broken. The final battle for the Temple of Jerusalem was near.